Good morning. Hello, everyone. My name is Jay Carmel. I'm a principal at Renaissance Strategic Advisors. We're a boutique A&D strategy consulting firm. I lead our commercial aerospace practice there. So we are providing a lot of support, strategic support and M&A advisory work for much of the aerospace and defense supply chain. I'm excited today to be with a great group helping charge forward into helping sort of chart a new path in AAM and navigating the challenges that we've faced over the last, call it 9 years of AAM's maybe formal existence. So I'll let each of the panelists go down the line and do quick introductions. I think the goal for today is really to hear about different perspectives on adapting to this very wild industry that has been forming over the almost last decade. There's obviously been a lot of excitement, a lot of change, a lot of a new period right now, perhaps, of coming to terms with reality of the challenges in building this industry. And so I think key to any company's success in this type of environment will obviously be adaptation, figuring out how to change and evolve with our learnings. And I think we've got some great perspectives to work through this today. So start with you, and everybody can do quick intros.
Yep. So I'm Riona Arm-Smith. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of MagniX. MagniX is a technology platform company. We develop electric propulsion systems for aerospace, and we've really been a leader in this space since our first flight almost 5 years ago to the day. We've powered more electric aircraft than I think anyone in the world, from de Havilland Beaver, Cessna Caravan, Dash 8s, Robinson 44 helicopter, Aviation Alice. We've got a couple more coming up in the next few months, and we have a deep partnership with NASA to really develop what it means to actually certify this technology. We've really been the leader in certification of electric engines. We're the first to agree special conditions against Part 33 for certification of an electric engine, and that's something that we're really proud of our track record in that area.
Great, Chip.
Yeah, I'm Chip Palambini with Beta. Beta is an electric aviation company. We are building eVTOLs as well as fixed-wing all-electric aircraft. Slightly different strategy, I think, than some others entering the eVTOL space, which we can get into. And early on in our business, it was core to our foundation that we were building an ecosystem and not a single product-based aviation business. And foundational to that was our charging infrastructure, which was something, again, core to our strategy and our entry into service that we then productified, as Mano on our team likes to say, and have embraced partnerships with, quote, competitors, I like to think of them as our peers in the space, to use our charging infrastructure. And as AAM has matured, and I think if we maybe reframe AAM as electric aviation or new propulsion technologies in aviation, there are certain challenges that exist in electric propulsion where there aren't off-the-shelf solutions. And Beta's working with others to figure out how we can share that, because there are competitive spaces, but there's also a lot more room for collaboration in the industry.
Great, thanks, Chip.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ed Lovelace. I'm the CTO at Ampere. We're based in Long Beach, and we're also an electrified aviation solution company. We've been flying hybrid electric experimental aircraft for over 5 years now. I believe we still have the largest hybrid electric fleet flying today. And we've hit a number of first in industry milestones along the way with those experimental aircraft. Our launch product is going to be a hybrid electric upgrade for the Cessna Caravan. That will be sold to airline operators and lessors as a supplemental type certified kit that we will install and we will have maintenance and service contracts for. But that's just the launch product. The whole idea here, again, is to develop an electrification platform that can be adapted to different aircraft models, and then farther out in our roadmap, move on to clean sheet, purpose-designed aircraft.
Great, thanks, Ed. So we'll jump in here. As I mentioned, there's obviously been a wide range of issues that have helped shape the direction of the industry over the last almost decade. As my old boss who was in the Marine Corps says, Semper Gumby is kind of his mantra for this environment right now. So if we think about these various issues, and let's call them, one of them being technology, our improved understanding of technical opportunity, the challenges with certain technical elements. We then have finance and investors. That's another theme that has kind of forced shaping how companies are positioning themselves. You have market, customer pull, customers kind of telling you to do certain things, and that helps change your direction. We have regulation, and either the clarity around that or the lack thereof. And then you have culture as a final theme, where you think about the public's acceptance and that helping shape maybe how you position your strategy. So if you think about those 5 things, technology, kind of finance or investors, market or the customer side of things, regulation, and then culture. Which of those themes, let's go down the line here and do a quick rapid fire, which of those themes do you think has had the biggest impact on your company's strategy as it stands today?
Of course, they all have some element, but I'd say regulatory strategy has really driven the early part of our process.
Okay.
Regulatory.
All of them, I think. I don't know, technology, I think that's, we were founded based on, we had a technology, and that kind of, the company entered into aerospace from having a technology already developed, and so that side, and it's more like, I think you call them challenges. I think a lot of these, they're opportunities, and I think that's kind of a lot of the theme of what I see. It's finding opportunities with the challenges, right? And in the regulatory space is, I don't know. I find a lot of people say, "Oh, it's very hard. Certification is very hard." It's not. It's just work, right? It's a lot of work. You have to do the work. And I find a lot of people try and avoid doing the work. And it's like, just do the work that you need to go and do, and stop trying to avoid it, stop trying to change things, just go in. Because honestly, we found as a company, just doing the work is far quicker than arguing about doing the work. So just do the damn work.
Fair enough. Okay, so you think, it sounds like you're sticking to kind of the company's core in terms of the technology driving the purpose and the strategy. It sounds like the regulatory environment has, in your view, had a bigger impact on why you've maybe taken certain changes or taken on new opportunities. Can you maybe expand on that, Chip?
Yeah, I think either changes or we can control, there's what we can control and we can't control the regulators. And specifically with the regulators, we can't control their timelines, right? And even like Tuesday, we were with the interagency working group reviewing the SFAR for powered lift, and there's wording in there where if you make like a flow chart for it, you're like, is this what you meant? No, that's not really what we meant. Or even for powered lift, you're like, well, is this like how do you show, what's the means of compliance for this? And they're unable to articulate that. So like we're very eager to go do the work, but the regulator can't tell us what the work is we have to go do.
Yeah, you have to tell them that too.
Yeah, we have to tell them that too, and then wait an unknown amount of time for them to either not agree with us, but not disagree with us, right? So it's like if there was a clear process, like I think all of us in the room would be happy, because once the process is defined, you can go do the work and it removes the uncertainty. And the risk is in the uncertainty of how they determine that means of compliance or evaluating it, right?
So would you say then that dynamic is what has perhaps shaped some of Beta's decisions to try different market pursuits or consider things like CTOL versus VTOL, or?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there was a market pull, and then when there was an industry shift for the certification requirements of the aircraft to go to powered lift, we had a lot of customers who were asking for a CTOL variant of our aircraft. Okay. So I think it was the overlap of customer demand pulling for the CTOL versus a very clear path to certification for an electric CTOL, but a very still ambiguous path in terms of like the detailed work you have to do to show compliance for powered lift.
Interesting. Okay, so you do mention some of that customer pull being an influence, and I'm sure many others out there, and I know there's other companies that have been discussed in trade press recently about seeing new opportunities emerge for their subscale platforms that they didn't expect to exist when their main goal has been pursuing passenger aircraft. So
for sure, and I don't know if Carl's still here, but there are people who are doing the sort of more private pilot eVTOL sort of hobbyist aircraft that won't be used in sort of the working class of eVTOL, right?
Sure.
The path for private pilot, or the way the SFAR is set up, it becomes a bit challenging for that group. And I don't think it was intentional of the regulators to try to exclude like a clear pathway to private pilot certification for powered lift in the same way, but the SFAR is heavily focused on commercial scale operations, right? And getting a commercial pilot's license in powered lift category with an instrument rating. But then if you have, so right now we're sort of excluding more of the Part 91 operations of sort of private pilot eVTOL, which is a whole other sector, because that feeds the pilots of the future for the 135 operators and 121 operators in powered lift.
Right, okay, that's helpful. All right, Ed, what's your take? You said regulatory also
Yeah,
shaping the strategy.
Yeah, we all have technical market adoption and financial risks, and we are all on the panel, and as well as some of the other panelists over these 2 days have different solutions and different targets that we're going after there, but all of them really are pretty knowable. The one risk that we all share in common with the current market size of 0, because nobody has been certified yet, is certification and regulatory. And as Chip just mentioned, some aspects of that you have control over, some aspects you have less control over. Right. And so that's why we have that in combination with Ampere's ethos of having a very capital efficient strategy to get to market has led us in the direction we have to sort of minimize that regulatory risk and get into the market as fast and capital efficient as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So I'd be curious, as you think about some of the major milestones in each of your companies' history over the last handful of years, going to go through a few different items in terms of those diversification moments or those light bulb moments where you realized and woke up as a group, as a team, as a leadership, whoever it might be, and said, okay, this is one of our maybe pivot points, so to say. First one, let's start with is maybe a product portfolio shift. And Riona, I'll start with you because I think magniX has an interesting history here. What led to the aha moment where you decided to perhaps go beyond your initial mission of maybe a motor focus and start looking at taking on other aspects of the portfolio?
Yeah, I think, as I said, magniX really started from having a very core torque-dense motor technology and has really built on that in the aerospace industry. And so we started out with just the core of the motor. We added power electronics to that capability, recognizing that if you're going to go and certify an electric propulsion system or electric engine, as the FAA makes us call it, you have to have control over the electronics. You cannot outsource that to somebody else. It's it's the heart, it's the control system, it's the protection system, it's how you actually are going to show that this thing is certifiable. So really added that in early. That was the first shift in kind of that recognition that we needed to control more of our own destiny. I think the next biggest shift, and the big one that we've made in the past year, is to add batteries to our portfolio. And I think that really came from customers. We saw that there was kind of challenges out there. Our customers were having challenges. We've integrated, five different platforms with pretty much a different battery, or one was a hydrogen fuel cell. And we had to get involved deeply in the integration of our electric engine, the aircraft, and the battery system. How it all talks to each other in terms of comms, how you do pre-charge, how the whole system is just integrated with the DC bus architecture, how you make that safe, contactors, fuses, all of this sort of stuff. We had to get involved almost every single time. And we found that our customers were not having a great experience in what was out there in terms of the battery market. And we were certainly looking at it as a big risk for our company, not having control over that and sort of waiting for somebody to come through and certify a battery. And so we spent years trying to find the right partner And earlier this year, myself and another one of the VPs at MagniX, we just looked at each other and said, you know what, we've got to do this ourselves. And we're owned by a single shareholder, a single investor. We went to him and said, hey, look, we're having these challenges, but in challenges, huge opportunity. Pitched it to him. He said, go for it. Funded it. Now we're doing it. So, yeah, that's really been the big shift for us, is that just we've got to take on most of the development of the powertrain, everything through to like cockpit integration and that sort of stuff. So displays, and we don't do displays ourselves, but who knows what you need to display, and a pilot needs to see from, electric engine better than the electric engine manufacturer. So we get involved from everything from throttle integration to displays. We do a lot of work with like a lot of partners who are in the room who help us integrate them into aircraft. Propellers, governors, we partner in that. We don't do everything ourselves, but where we have to, where it makes sense and we can offer an advantage and a better, an easier route through for our customers, we get on board and just take that on.
So it's very much born out of thinking about your supply chain, the vertical integration elements, and that's been the biggest driver as opposed to trying to get into other product categories. It's really about...
It's just been watching our customers struggle, to be honest, and seeing that customers are crying out for a solution that isn't out there, and that realization that, once we built the power electronics capability, you realize that you have software capabilities, complex hardware capability, electronics, you know how to do thermal management, you know how to package it all in a box. Well, that kind of sounds like a battery apart from the cells, right? So really that kind of, you have that engineering expertise to be able to go and take that on. We started out thinking that we didn't. And the reality is we probably know more about integration into electric aircraft than anyone else, especially people who are battery cell experts, right? So it makes sense for us to go and do that. And I think, you do the same at Beta, right? It's these things that sometimes you just have to take these on because otherwise your customer just doesn't have the seamless experience.
Yeah, I think that's a common theme that I know we've talked about yesterday and is very evident in a lot of the leaders in the market right now. Chip, how would you describe, there have been a few, at least from an outside perspective, following the company, there have been a few pivot points, or not pivot points, but changes, these aha moments, whether it be going into the charging product versus, again, maybe an aircraft decision choice. Can you speak to one of those moments or both and kind of what really led to those key changes?
Yeah, I think the charging decision was pretty foundational in Kyle's view of the business. His background is power electronics, and he had, when he started Beta, this very frustrating moment of trying to use, I forget what some charger brand, and couldn't charge, and he was late for a meeting. And it was like this aha moment of if our operators are waiting for a third party to go fix a charger, it kills the operating economics of the aircraft, right? And that creates a very negative customer experience and probably has the highest impact to a negative dispatch rate of an electric aircraft is if the chargers don't work. So being able to control that destiny, which built out one of our values of we care the most, and that we care the most led us to pull additional components of the aircraft internal, so our flight controller, developing our motor. We competed 3 outside motor vendors, MagniX at the time, but to build motors and the solutions, and I think this is what you were getting at, become very inefficient. They could build a good motor, but by the time you try to figure out how do you pre-charge it, where do the contactors go, doing an individual component in isolation leads to a very inefficient from space, weight, safety budget application in an electric aircraft. And so you can make electric aircraft work with very nice payloads, but it has to be thoughtfully designed. You don't have the same budget available for inefficiency and design that exists in traditional aircraft.
That makes sense. Okay, that's helpful. Ed, how would you approach this? I know Ampere has also been a leader in trying to push electrification powertrain solutions forward, but it's obviously a journey there through that. How would you describe some of these aha moments?
Yeah, sure. So for those who remember the very original founding of Ampere back in 2016, the original vision concept was a vertical takeoff, fully electric jet. Supersonic, too. The team quickly after that ideation phase, still has that, net zero, fast, clean vision in the long-term future of the company. But within the first year, quickly realized the path they wanted to get there was, again, this capital-efficient path, starting with hybrid electric solutions, modifying existing airframes, and then I think by the second year had developed the Caravan as the launch product for that. Now, we've gone through, of course, some technical detail changes on the configuration of the Caravan since then, but that's, for the last 7 years, has really been the core launch focus of the company. Now, what's happened during the development of that, of course, is we've started to recognize where some of the high value points are in what we're contributing. And that, of course, includes the overall aircraft integration and bringing that through certification. That's quite a chunk of IP that is part of what the company is contributing. The other piece, again, I mentioned that the whole idea here is to develop an electrification platform that can be adapted. So we very quickly, over the last 3 years, I'd say, have really come to realize how the hybrid amp drive powertrain unit can be easily adapted across really the whole power range of the turboprop market. And so that's really how we're leveraging the investments on the launch product to reduce the cost and time of moving into a much wider market. And I'd say the last sort of peel over the last year that we've gotten is how some of those electrification platform technologies are going to take us into applications in regional and transport class electrification.
Okay, interesting. So maybe shifting lens a little bit now to think about the market maybe and diversifying how you go and target priority customers or certain segments. We've heard a lot over the years and in discussions and at events like this where people maybe started with a passenger focus and shift to cargo, or a lot of discussion around thinking commercial first, but then recognizing the obvious need to maybe go pursue defense instead. Would welcome one of you jumping in first to maybe think where your company has maybe had one of its biggest realizations of recognizing your initial prioritization of a certain customer group maybe needed to be rethought, and why that was.
Well, one aspect I'll mention, of course, is as the capital markets started to contract over the last 2 to 3 years, we adopted again, sort of another layer of the capital efficient ethos of the company, which was to move us into a near cash burn neutral position, leveraging a number of government R&D contracts that were very well aligned with our core commercial mission. And that's played out over the last couple of years as now capital markets are starting to recover, and we find ourselves in a really good place to take advantage of that. But the shift to government R&D was a very noticeable shift for the company.
Chip, Beta, I feel like has an interesting, or at least from what they've mentioned publicly, is I remember in the early days really focused on United Therapeutics and really pursuing the organ delivery. Obviously, you've taken on other initiatives as well, looking at other customer groups. Can you speak to either how some of those case study examples came up, or what you think has guided some of the biggest shifts in your market prioritization?
Yeah, I think in our market prioritization has stayed with healthcare cargo first. We have, due to what you mentioned earlier, like just the cultural acceptance of like a new class of aircraft, and really this idea of like the skies over San Francisco will be darkened by eVTOLs like the day at TC Day +1, right? And just seeing it to be a much easier market adaptation, effectively in a place where you're not relying on consumer adoption. Like unfortunately, the UPS pilot doesn't get to pick which airframe they fly, right? You get hired as a pilot and you fly the airplane, you fly for the paycheck. Same for medical companies as well. So we're not relying on again, consumers being okay with a new class of aircraft. So I think that's driven the focus there. We have taken on, of course, passenger commitments. We released, our concept for a passenger interior, but those will come after our delivery and logistics customers.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Riona, how are you? I know it's a little bit of a different story when you're a powertrain provider and you're maybe thinking about the aircraft OEM, but you still have to have the end customer and who you're eventually delivering a solution to as well. How has the company thought about customer groups and prioritization, and how has that maybe evolved in the last few years?
Yeah, I think that obviously we remain pretty platform agnostic, and so our customers are really varied. Like our first ever customer, our first ever partner is Harbour Air, an airline, right? The largest seaplane operator in North America. They're not what you would think of as, they're not an OEM. They don't produce aircraft. They have to do all of their own maintenance in-house, from the engine, the aircraft, and everything. And so they're actually in a really capable place to be able to go and modify an aircraft. And so that relationship there directly with an airline that actually operates this is the best form of feedback we can possibly get. Mm-hmm. Right? It really helps us to better develop a product that an airline actually needs at the end of the day. We learned a lot through our first integration with them, frankly, about how hard it was for them as not electrical and comms experts, software experts, to integrate. And everything we've done is make it as simple as possible to integrate our engines into new aircraft. Whether that's retrofits, new aircraft, we're very much kind of customer feedback led in terms of our approach. We've got a really good track record in the industry. You want to go fly an electric aircraft, I can pretty much guarantee I can get you flying. And that's really led to us being kind of this trusted partner in the industry, and so customers come to us. Yeah. And so it's a little bit less of, I think part of the discussion yesterday was make an aircraft and put it in your customer's hands, and you don't have to dictate what the use case is. And I think that's very true for us. Like, what's going to be the first market versus the biggest market, I don't know. And to a certain extent, I'm pretty ambivalent about what that is, right? I know that we can deliver technologies that make aircraft sustainable, lower cost of operation, quieter, right? The de Havilland Beaver that we fly with Harbour Air is 20 decibels quieter in all phases of flight versus a radial. I mean, it's a radial engine to an electric. You should expect it to be quieter, but there's real-world data that we have, in our partnership with Harbour Air as the airline shows that for them, this thing works economically. And that is very powerful for us. So it's not just the technology, it's that at the end of the day, you can actually deliver something that is going to be economically viable.
Okay, that's interesting. So this next question, and I'll do one or two more, but then I do want to open it up to the audience and, for some questions. But let's just say in a hypothetical situation here, each of your companies is in slightly different, has had different financial evolutions. You mentioned you have a single investor really guiding the company. Beta has obviously had a few different major successful funding rounds, and Ampere has also had some funding rounds as well, maybe on a different scale so far. If you were in a hypothetical situation where you flip your current situation and you think about your company moving from a single investor, but instead you have to now take on the approach of maybe some of your peers who are moving from round to round, or vice versa. Beta didn't have to worry about major fundraising rounds, or Ampere didn't have to worry about chasing the next round. Any way you can speculate or at least think about how some of your strategic decisions, your diversification decisions that we've been talking about already might have been different? Just overall, as you can tell, really trying to understand how you think the financial environment that your company has been faced with has led to perhaps the path that we're on, and if that path might have been different.
Yeah, I think I can start there. I mean, I feel like I'm in an incredibly privileged position to have a single investor. I don't have to do the VC rounds. I can take a much longer term view of the company. It is much less short-sighted, I think, not having to do things to achieve, maybe public media events. I can really put the company's head down and really work on getting things across the line, right? As you get closer and closer to certification and you do the work, there are less of the big fancy milestones, I would say. Like, it's hard, right? You go in, if I do media interviews and that sort of stuff, journalists will ask me, what are you doing? You talk about certification and they won't write on it. Nobody cares about the details of certification. The average reader in the media, even in aerospace trade media, they won't publish the details of where you are. It's boring, right? Certification is boring. And so I feel very privileged with the position that we're in, that I don't have to make headlines out of non-events, right? And I think that's, and I'm very grateful for that. I think it would be we would have to take a very different, more short-sighted approach to the company if we were having to go through multiple funding rounds.
Chip?
Yeah, so maybe I'm optimistically reading into the question, but if we were unconstrained from a capital perspective, or we went back 4 or 5 years ago to like unconstrained capital markets, you would probably see multiple aircraft being developed simultaneously. Okay. From us, and you might see us actually doing some very foundational battery cell development work, which would differentiate from the type of battery work Magni-X and Beta do right now, making modules, and trying to bring as much of that production domestically. And the work, how many people here have conformed a part in terms of FAA conformity? One person. It is, yeah, I'm sure you guys have.
Previous company.
Yeah, it is if you want to see inefficiency of certification, to conform like what you would think of like a very simple machined aluminum part is like the most boring work, but that is foundational to getting your TIA, right? And no one's like, you can't make a sexy video about it.
No,
You're not
you
going to
cannot.
put something out on social media, but like
Sounds like a challenge for.
yeah, and someone asked a question about conformity in here, but like
fantastic.
that is what you need to do. But it takes tens of thousands of engineering hours to conform an entire aircraft, and like it's not sexy, but it's the work we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, all of those things are true. So if we were...
Let's just say you had maybe been a part of the SPAC boom and we're in
Right,
different...
right. I will say, I've worked for a number of startups, again, similar role, CTO, VP of engineering type role. And when you have unconstrained capital available, the sort of impetus to spend and spend quickly is very, very strong. And, I think we've all seen in the industry that happen with a few companies to getting themselves to a burn rate that ends up putting them at risk when that capital kind of goes away. So I would say we would take a measured approach to growth, trying to keep focus on the core launch product, because if we don't launch the first product, the rest kind of doesn't matter. Yeah. But what I would say we would put more investments in is kind of the medium and long-term technology roadmap that we've developed. Whereas today we might be 85%, 15%, that might, with more unconstrained capital, be 60%, 20, or something like that. Because there are a number of things, such as advanced energy storage development, that we would invest more in.
Okay, that's interesting. So I'll maybe shift here with some of the time remaining to starting to tackle some of these questions. I think this notion of the aftermarket and MROs is a good angle to think about diversification, different schools of thought around which companies should get involved in services for your products. Seems like this could apply to anyone here, but how do you view maintenance and how you intend as a company to either address that yourself or help have others do that for you, or would welcome your guys' views here?
We are working with some MROs and our customers. It's interesting because all of the operators, especially the larger operators, have a different preference for maintenance, right? So we're not really going to prescribe to our customers on how to maintain. I think who here drives an electric car? Right. When's the last time you had to do an oil change on your electric car? You don't do it, right? Like, think about it if we were going the other way, where everything was electric, and now we were trying to introduce combustion engines with turbine or radial or piston, and it was like, oh wait, you mean every 50 hours on that IO 360 I need to change the oil? My electric motor, I don't have to do any scheduled maintenance on it. Maybe you have some inspections, right? But like the maintenance is really going to shift to more inspection-based and less like there's no fluids in our engine, right? Like there's nothing to change. So it will be more inspection-based. I think you will see more sort of LRU wholesale replacement because there's only a few components that you could really change on an electric engine. Like you're not going to rewind a stator in the field, right?
Nope.
No. So, but like you're seeing like the motors on a Tesla are good for 1 million miles. 1 million miles out of a consumer grade like build to cost electric motor, right? Anyone get 1 million miles out of your last combustion engine? No, right? Like it's a total, and the orders of magnitude we're talking to from like flight hours operation are just beyond what like the FAA can like even reasonably digest from a regulatory perspective, right? So you put it to a few thousand hours that they can digest, and then when we get to the inspections of a few thousand hours, it's gonna be like, oh, you can double that, double that, double that, and eventually you'll get to life of airframe. So I think what maintenance looks like for an electric powertrain is very different than the traditional concept of maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. One of my previous startups was a hybrid electric commercial vehicle business. And when we entered the market and grew to producing at a rate of about 1,000 units a year, we did a very similar rollout than I expect we will do here in aviation with Ampere. There was already, an existing network of repair and maintenance facilities for commercial vehicles, for fleets. Every fleet had their favorite repair facility group that they worked with. Same thing we expect will roll out here. We'll do the first installations and first maintenance ourselves, but once we move out of our local geography, it will make sense for us to partner. We already have some announced partnerships with major worldwide MROs, and we expect that'll happen too. And eventually they'll become a co-selling opportunity for us.
Yeah. Brianna?
Yeah, I think it's that. It's about creating a network, right, of MRO capability. The last thing you want is an aircraft on ground for a week or a month while you ship the engine back to go and overhaul it, right? And so, but like Chip said, what is an overhaul? It's probably more of a strip and inspection that's mandated by the FAA, right, at a certain point in time until you can prove that, you can get there. And so I think what does it look like in the future is a longer-term vision of where do you get to, but I think a lot of it is just going to be spares, replacements, right? What do you have? How many engines do you have in your pool, in your fleet? Really that. I think batteries is different, right? Obviously, just the life, the cycle depletion on the battery is just so much more intense. So I think everyone says, oh, what's your TBO on the engine? And I'm like, well, what is an overhaul of an electric engine? But let's not talk about that. Let's focus on the battery, right? The battery is where it really matters. Mm-hmm. And so our battery design, we've been very intentional about our ability to quickly remove it, right? And so they're not hot swappable. I think getting to that with the FAA, you'll spend longer updating your logbook if you hot swap the batteries than it would take you to recharge. But yeah, just being able to rack them in and rack them out, and it not being like a Tesla where you can't get to, right? You don't want to have an aircraft on ground because you have one bad cell.
Sure. Right.
So just thinking about that sort of stuff. So it's more about availability and that on-wing constant, inspections rather than this big MRO overhaul network that we see with gas turbines today.
Yeah. One quick final question to close us out, and as we kind of put a finer point on this diversification concept, and I apologize, we're not going to get to all these questions, but as your companies continue to ideally grow and succeed, and you are faced with more and more of these opportunities to potentially take on new products, pursue new markets, whatever it might be, how do you expect or intend to think carefully about when you diversify too much? I think there's certainly some examples out in the market over the last decade of companies that tried to do too much at once, and it may have led to their downfall. How do you expect for each of your companies to be thoughtful around going after the right things that make sense and maybe saying no to some things?
Yeah, so just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. That said, I think if you look around, you'll see more examples of startups maybe diversifying too early and it putting them into a bit of a crunch. That all said, we do have a process for thinking about new applications, and it usually comes down to what's the long-term growth size of the market, or is there some strategic value for that particular application that doesn't require it to be large. Yeah.
Okay. Chip, how are you guys looking at that?
Yeah, I mean, there's the traditional like MBA methods, like market over time size, right? And some confidence factor on that, as a function of time. But really we've, getting back to the funding question, we've made promises to our investors.
Yep.
We have kept our promises to date, which is what's led to our successful, closeout Series C a few weeks ago. And that's been awesome because we've upheld those promises. So the first filter is if any of these diversification efforts will negatively impact the promises we've kept, independent relatively of like how big it might, like it's a conversation we have to have, right?
That makes
so that's, keeping promises is super core.
I imagine you might have a similar, albeit with instead of a group of investors, you're maybe single investor focused, but does that play a role in how you're going to think about some of these future decisions?
Yeah, I think we're very customer-led in this space. Really, what do our customers want? I mean, I get asked almost daily if I'll do a different size motor, right? Can you do this, right? From anything from, 14 kilowatts to 5 megawatts. It's a daily ask. And most of it, is it aligned with what we're doing? Is there a market? Is there real customer demand for this? And really using that as our guiding principle, finding the right customer partners to actually go and work with. If you're going to go and do something different, that there's a reason and a business case, and there is a strong market there to go and do so. And you're able to leverage not just that, it's not just a single opportunity, right? A lot of us, what do we do is how can we make this apply to multiple different platforms? So if one, right, especially VC backed, it's so hard. This industry is so hard. So if you have a product that only works for one player, it's very risky.
Risky, yeah. Okay, well, we've unfortunately run out of time, but this was at least interesting and rewarding for me, so I appreciate all your time, and I probably speak for a lot of people here in the room. Thank you and your companies for helping playing your role in charting the industry forward. So eager to see your next milestones ahead, so thank you.
Thank you.